To get to the settings, we'll go to the Settings drop-down menu, and we won't pick project or sequence settings at this time because of the fact that we set those up when we were starting our project. However, we can come back to them and change it if we need to. We are going to go to the application settings, and when we select application settings, the application setting menu will pop right up for us. Inside the settings, you'll see that we have a lot of different choices in the left-hand side. The first one is timeline, however. And in timeline, we have many settings that we can work with. The first one, extend clips when applying transition or crossfade. I like to keep this checked because whenever I add a transition, it leaves my cut in the exact place on the timeline where it was. I also leave checked insert default crossfade and transition, meaning it's going to create a crossfade anytime I place a transition. I'm not worried about insert default transition, set cut point, or adjust frame rate. However, I am going to deselect add clips to map track. The reason being is because later on as I map my tracks, I want Edius to work in a certain way, and that's the reason why I have that selected. Snap of event, it's going to snap to whatever I choose here. Also on the defaults, I like to turn sync mode on and turn ripple mode off. I leave insert and overwrite basically the way that it is. On waveform, I like to change it from log to linear because in linear it shows me a much defined or more defined waveform so I can more easily work with the sound. The clip thumbnail just means when I have a clip on the timeline, do I want to have a clip thumbnail on the left, right, both, or neither? Underneath render, you'll see that there's rendering options, and I have all these checked because when I do render, I'd like to have them all rendered. And also I have my rendering decisions left on the default of 4 frames. Duration, still images. I like to take my still images up to 7. I do so by clicking on the seconds and pulling up with my left mouse button. I like to leave those at 7, and then also the titles. The reason being is it doesn't matter how big my view is, I'm able to go in and see my titles and still images when I put them down. VMute I leave right where it is. On my deck settings, just so you know, pre-roll 5 seconds means when I have an endpoint that I want to start capturing at, it's going to pre-roll it 5 seconds before it. The margin means it'll start capturing 2 seconds before the endpoint and 2 seconds afterwards, so I have a handle that I can use for transitions if I need to. Confirm file name, I like to check this and place it before the capture so I can name the clips I'm capturing before they actually capture. I do not load to the player after the capture. And, skip errors and continue capturing. Some people like to leave this. I like to actually see if there's a problem when I'm capturing, so I uncheck this. The next is automatically divide files. You'll notice that there's 4 choices: at timecode break, when aspect ratio changes, and when audio sampling rate changes. I uncheck the first 3 of them, but I do leave the recorded time data changes. And the reason being is because every time I push that pause button and there's a break in that date stamp, then it's going to divide that file for me automatically. In restoring offline clips, just so you can see it very quickly, playback, you'll notice that there's a few things here. Stop playback and frame drop. I don't necessarily have that checked just because of the fact that I don't mind it stuttering a little bit while I'm editing. I do have continue playback when editing checked, but the rest of them unchecked. Buffer frames before playback. You have a choice of 5 to 15 frames. Also, you have the choice of skipping frames during the multicam feature, just in case your hard drive system isn't fast enough to keep everything running smoothly. You can skip from up to 1 to 5 frames, meaning you're playing every other frame up to every 5th frame. Match frame, just basically when you're searching for a frame that's up in the player window, down on the timeline, you have a search direction. Do you want it to go previous to the cursor to the next match frame? And then your target tracks. Do you want to do all tracks or just certain tracks while you're doing it? Underneath application, a number of recently used files. You can actually have up to 10 of them. Show thumbnail in the most recently used list. I have that small. I do have it set to save the windows, use the tooltips, and enable the autosave for every 3 minutes. On the customize, you'll notice that you can customize your buttons. Underneath buttons, it's a little different than it was in previous versions of Edius. Because if you'll take a look up on the pull-down menu, not only do you have player and recorder window, but you have player left, player center right, and player right. The way that the GUI is set up now enables you to be able to go in and keep everything pretty much where you want it and add buttons just where you want it. You'll see also that you can pick the bin and other windows to be able to customize those buttons. On the timeline, to be able to add a button, let's say that I decided I wanted to be able to create a freeze frame, and I want a button for doing that. I just highlight it, and then I go over to the right-hand side, highlight where I want it to go, and then select the arrows that point towards the current buttons. Notice that it kind of went between delete and ripple delete, so I'm going to go ahead and select the down button to have it go down one. And once I've done that, I have the button right where I want it to be. If I go into controls, the time show time code, this just means underneath the overlay windows, do I want to see current in-out duration total, what the size of the font is. I also have my overlay. This just basically plays with the overlay of where I want the overlay to show, such as my time code and also my audio meters. This just allows me to be able to show different types of information in the bin windows when I have the detailed view selected. Keyboard shortcuts. As you can see, we have a lot of commands that you can use and assign keyboard shortcuts to. All these keyboard shortcuts are completely and totally configurable. And going through the list, you can see even just in the top part of it, there's a lot of commands. If you want to assign one, you just select it, go to the Assign button, and a keyboard comes up that will allow you to be able to select whatever key that you want to be able to use, or combination of keys that you want to be able to use to create your keyboard shortcuts. And the last of our configurations or settings right here is window color. And this is just where it allows you to be able to change your window color tinting if you want to. It's not really that drastic. I like the default colors the way they are. Now that we have the settings done, there's just a couple of settings left that we need to do, and this is right here on the timeline. You'll notice on one V, I'm going to select the V to map the video there, and also right-click where that little A is on 1A and pick channel 1. I can also just select the track and then select the 2 key on track 2 to select channel 2. Now that I have this all set up, I'm ready to have Edius run and edit the way that I'm used to editing.